Welcome to Megaphone. Today we're learning about the podcast tab, and this is where you're going to spend the bulk of your time, guys, because you're going to be uploading new episodes and you're going to be adding your beautiful ad markers to those episodes so you can do your campaigns and your promos, and it all happens here. So when you first log into Megaphone, you'll be on your dashboard. Come on over here, click the tab for podcasts, and it'll bring you right to this page. Couple things to point out is you do have the ability over here with these buttons. You can import an RSS feed from another podcast host provider. So if you have a podcast that's on another provider and you want to bring them over to Megaphone, it's real easy to do that. You click import, you enter the RSS feed here, and pretty quickly, depending on how many episodes you're bringing over, you can import the description, the artwork, the media file. So very little work has to be done once you bring it over. The other thing you can do is create a podcast from scratch. So again, you click the button and you'll be able to create some basic information for your show. Before you do either of these, though, just give us a heads up at the network. So this does impact your account settings a little bit and the account that we have set up for you. So we just want to make sure that the right shows are under the right account. So give us a heads up. That would be awesome. Okay, so your page may look a little bit different than mine. I have 6 different podcasts that I'm currently managing because I'm crazy like that. You may only have 1 or 2, and that's completely fine. The first thing you're going to do is click on the podcast that you're working on. And this is going to open up to the main podcast/episode page. Okay, that's what I'm going to call it. And really the top part here is more focused on your podcast as a whole. And then the bottom half focuses more on the episodes. So if we start at the top, you'll see if we click this Embed Podcast, this gives you the option of embedding all of the episodes that are part of your podcast. And you have some functionality with this. You can disable sharing. You can change it and toggle it between a light theme or a dark theme. And then this is a code that you would grab and put that in your website if you want the whole podcast. Okay, there is an option that I'll show you in a second when we talk about the episodes where you can embed individual episodes, and players for individual episodes. And I'll show you that in a second. But this is where you would do the entire podcast. You can also edit your podcast. If you are bringing over a podcast from an RSS feed, most of this information will already be in there. It's always a good idea to go back in there and double check stuff, perhaps tighten things up a little bit. And it's always good to go back and kind of check over things. But yeah, some of this is self-explanatory, right? You have your ratings, your, whatever your language is that your podcast is in, your podcast category. This is where you would change that. You have author details, whatever email you want associated with your show, the author tag. So for those of you who are joining and you're part of our channels that we have on Castbox and Himalaya and Apple Podcasts, when I tell you to add Independent Podcast Network to your author tag, this is where it's done, okay? But most of this stuff is pretty easy to understand. If you want to change your artwork here, this is where you would do that, okay? And then you just upload a new image and it'll add it right there. Okay, but let's go back to this page. This is getting a little bit in the weeds. You hardly ever have to click on this gear box, but I'll just bring it up really quickly. Megaphone does provide you with a podcast page. So if you didn't have a website, you would be able to just link to a site on Megaphone and it makes it look nice and pretty. And on that page, you can link to some of these other places that house your podcast that people may be subscribing to. So that's what this page is. And I'll show you that show page in just a second. Some Megaphone settings. So these are things such as adjusting your RSS feed, enabling multiple RSS feeds, and you guys may have heard of pod sites that allow you to track, your campaigns a little bit better. That's what this is. So that's really what that tab is. Ad settings, and we're going to talk about pre-rolls and post-rolls a lot more when we talk about campaigns and promos. But if you are brand new to Megaphone and this whole idea of dynamic insertion is a little bit different for you, then you may want to come in here and to be able to immediately start working with pre-rolls and post-rolls, which really isn't involving advertisers too much, because advertisers really want mid-rolls, right? They want ads in the middle of your show, not necessarily at the very beginning or at the very end. But if you wanted to come in here so you could start pushing out messages and promos to your audience, you could certainly do those as pre-rolls and post-rolls. And instead of going through and adding them individually to your show, if you wanted to do it for your entire podcast, you could come in here, you could enable this and just tell it how many pre-rolls and how many post-rolls you want to allow for. So this isn't actually putting those into your show. This is just putting the markers. So down the road, you have the ability to run a pre-roll or a post-roll, okay? And for me, I already have all mine kind of set up, and so I'm not going to select this option. But this is a real quick way of being able to get started with using the dynamic content, the dynamic tools, and you can always go back and disable it later. Mtm Settings. You won't have this if you're not part of the Megaphone Targeted Marketplace program. Okay, but this is where you would set your price floor for your ads. Okay. The sales team at Megaphone, that's what MTM is. So they have their own sales program where they go ahead and they reach out to other podcasts. It's a 50-50 ad split between you and Megaphone. And you're basically telling them what your minimum is. So the system will not trigger an ad for you if you're part of that campaign, if you're part of that program, and let's say your price floor right here, my mid-roll price floor is $28. Well, if a campaign's going for $27, my show won't even be considered. So this is the bottom that you're willing to do, okay? But this tab, again, isn't even going to show up if you're not part of that. Okay, so let's get out of this. Didn't make any changes. Let's go ahead and save. So that's the top part of this section. Now let's focus more on the episodes. Two things to look at here. We have this episodes tab and we have a drafts tab. Episodes are anything that's already been released. And then once you schedule an episode for release, you'll also see it appear here. If it's set to be released at a specific time. So you've scheduled it, it just hasn't hit that date yet or that time yet, it'll show up here. But I really want to focus on drafts here because this is probably going to be a new concept for a lot of people, but when you are thinking about your show, I think you should really plan your podcast as much as possible, especially if you really want to make use of your inventory. And when I say inventory, I am talking about the places in your show where you could either put a promo or you could put an ad. That's your inventory. Okay, and you have to know what inventory is available, right? The first step to knowing what inventory is available is for you to tell Megaphone what inventory you have. Okay, because if you don't tell it what you have, it can't tell you if something's been scheduled, right? So this is the first step, and we will talk about this a little bit more when we talk about inventory. That's a tab over at the side. But I am a big fan of coming in here. I want you guys to think long-term for your podcast and start planning long-term. So one of the things I do for my shows, this is a weekly podcast. All of my podcasts are weekly podcasts. So when I do my planning, I come in here. You can see the publication date. This show debuts on Thursdays. That's when episodes are released, on Thursdays. And so I come in here and I add my inventory a year in advance. Okay. I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, I'm going to scroll down here really quick so you can see what I'm talking about. All right, I'm going to show you how to do this, but check out these dates on the side. So this is every Thursday from when I recorded this video up until the end of 2020. Okay. And this is what I encourage you to do too. So whether you've got a daily show, you've got a weekly show, you've got a bi-weekly show, doesn't matter. Come in here and put your inventory. I'm going to show you how to do that now because I've already done it with this show, but I haven't done it with another show that I have. So I'm going to go back to podcasts. I'm going to hop in my pregnancy show called Preggy Pals. We're going to go to drafts. Now I have some drafts listed in here. I have drafts up through April 27th. This podcast releases on Mondays. So let me show you what I'm going to do. This is how you plan it out. It doesn't take very long. You're going to do this with me. You ready? We're going to go to Plan Inventory. Now I know it's already through April 27th, so I'm not going to worry about the month of April. I'm going to go to May. And then I know this releases on Monday. So watch this. I'm just going to click. You ready? I'm going to click all of the Mondays from now until the end of the year. So I'm already through August, now September, October, November. We're almost there, guys. Bear with me. I just want to show you how easy this is. And December. Now, in my shows, I know that I always allow for 1 pre-roll, 4 mid-rolls, and 1 post-roll. It's very important with dynamic ads that whatever you decide that you do, so however many mid-roll spots you want to have, however many pre-rolls or post-rolls, whatever those numbers are, especially with the mid-rolls, because you really have to format your show around taking breaks, right? That you keep it consistent. That's really rule number 1 when it comes to dynamic insertion. You don't want some episodes with only 3 mid-roll spots and some with 5. There's no way to sell that because your episodes aren't consistent. So make sure it's the same. In my case, I have 4 mid-roll spots. And then look, guys, this is what I do. Create episodes and watch this. Look at this. It created all of my episodes through the end of 2020. And that, my friends, is how easy it is to start really looking at the inventory in your shows so you know what's been sold and what's still available, right? And this is the first step. Drafts are really important. As you can see, it just gives you kind of a generic title. When you're ready to go back in there, all you do is click this. This is where you would change your episode title. You would change all of this, okay? This is what a blank episode looks like. So obviously you got to go in there and do some stuff. I always think it's helpful to see what it looks like with some content actually put in there, okay? So I'm going to show you what it looks like with content put in there. Let's go to this episode here, gender prediction. So you can see I've got some numbers there. This is helpful. It shows me my episode downloads for the first 30 days. Obviously, when you first release, it's going to be the highest, and it's going to go down from there. This shows me my total downloads. So since I released this episode, how many total downloads do I have? This tells me I've got a pre-roll that's scheduled for this. Now, this doesn't mean that there's an ad or there's an actual pre-roll, like a promo running in these spots. This is just the ad markers or the promo markers. It uses the same technology. You just tell it later on if you want that spot to be reserved for a promo or a paid ad or a campaign, right? But here, this is how we tell, okay, so I know I've got 4 mid-rolls, that's good, and I know I want 1 pre-roll, 1 post-roll. So it's a great way to like double check and make sure everything's set up okay. This is the episode link. So if you wanted to promote something on social and you didn't want to link to your website or wherever else, you typically promote your show, if you just wanted a link to the media file, this is where you would grab it. And then just some basic information. If you have an ad that's scheduled for an episode, that information will appear down here. This isn't where you schedule your ads, but again, we're just looking at the episode at a glance. So if you want to go in and just kind of see, well, what is going on with this actual episode, I can tell really quickly that I have an ad that's scheduled and then it's scheduled as a mid-roll, okay? And I can even tell up here what position, right? So I have 4 mid-rolls. I can tell that this is scheduled for the first mid-roll position and it has priority 1. We'll go over all of that when we talk about campaigns. Just know that this is a nice, quick just glance at what's going on with your episode since it's already published. Down here, if you are using the Megaphone embedded players, that's where you would get this information. I don't use the embedded players that much, and so it looks like you have to have a minimum of 30 listeners, and I don't have that. So sorry, guys. I can't show you what that looks like. But this is just a quick breakdown. Now, if we want to go in and edit the episode, or I'm going to show you what it looks like once an episode page is filled in a little bit more, right? Some of this is self-explanatory and you've probably seen it before, but really quickly, this is your episode title. Now, I personally don't put episode numbers in my titles, but if I did, this is where I would put my clean title. So without all the extra gook in it, right? Just, what is your actual title of your show? Don't give me your episode numbers, anything like that. What is the actual name of it? So you would put that there. You have your subtitle, which what I usually do is I figure out what my summary is, and I don't do a bunch of show notes and stuff, as you can see. I do a short little paragraph for my summary, and then usually I can take a short little sentence out of here and use it for my subtitle, okay? Whatever you do, don't start it the same way, because usually you need to make this as short as possible. Depending on the podcast player, you may only see 8 to 10 words max. So you don't want the beginning part of the sentence to be like, on today's episode, we talk about, and then that's pretty much all people see. So just keep this short and sweet, and don't make it the same for all of your episodes. If you have a exterior website link that you're, promoting that's on your website, I don't really do that with my shows, but if you did, it would go there. And again, some of this stuff is self-explanatory. Your episode rating, this is really important. If you have seasons that you're working on, your episode number is important. So make sure you put the number of the episode there. Your advertising tags, I don't use this section too much, but if you wanted to separate your episodes or know what kind of content, if you think you had an advertiser that would be interested in certain types of episodes, let's say, this is a podcast that's about pregnancy. So let's say, I think I might have an advertiser that could be interested in labor and delivery. So any of my episodes that focus on labor and delivery, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to write labor and delivery. That becomes the tag for this. And then when we talk more about campaigns, you can actually pull up episodes based on these tags. Okay. I don't use it too much, but that's what that's for. Probably one of the most important parts of this are your ability to set the dates, schedule out. I'm a big fan of, I've got multiple episodes that release throughout the week. So Sunday night, Monday morning is when I'm scheduling all of my episodes for the week. So this is where you change it. The default is whatever you have listed down here for your account. Okay. So whatever it's popping up, if that's the wrong time zone, just go in there in your account and you can mess with that a little bit. Okay. But you can save it as a draft. You can schedule it out. You could publish it immediately, whatever you would like to do. Now up here, this is where you would upload your file. Okay. And if you have an episode image that goes along with each episode, for me, I grab a lot of stock images that kind of go alongside whatever the episode is talking about. So I grab that here. And then once you add all of this information in, you're going to click save. And then it's basically going to process your audio. It's going to upload the audio to Megaphone. It's going to process it. And you'll see like a little progress bar appear. Okay. Once that's done, and this is the second part of it. So if you're doing dynamic ads and if you're on Megaphone, you better be at least learning the dynamic insertion process. Otherwise, that's really what Megaphone is all about. That's what they do really, really well. And so the first part is to upload the episode just like I showed you. Once it's available, now that doesn't mean published, that just means available on Megaphone's site. Then you go back in. Okay, you won't have this page because it's not published yet, but you'll have a section up here called Add Locator. If a file isn't uploaded, this is going to be grayed out, which is why I said you got to go back in there after the episode has been processed and it's now available on Megaphone servers. So you go back in and you click Add Locator. And this is what it looks like. Again, I've already done this episode, but when you come in here, you've got the ability to add a pre-roll or a post-roll. Now, when I showed you how to automatically add pre-rolls and post-rolls, in fact, I'll take you back there so you can see this really quickly. And back in Preggy Pals. And I believe it's over here. Add settings. Remember when we talked about this? Okay. This is why I keep this disabled, because if this were enabled, it would automatically add a pre-roll and a post-roll, however many you choose, to every episode. And there's no way to override that. So I've had situations where I really didn't want pre-rolls and post-rolls. What if I was, doing some sort of promo swap with someone? And I don't know. There's different times that, I just want more control over my content. You could certainly do this in the beginning, like I said, when you're first migrating your content over and you're, still getting used to dynamic ads. But once you've got the feel for it, I really do recommend leaving that on disabled. And then coming back in here, let's go back to the Add Locator section. When you first come on this page, again, this is already done, but these will look like this, okay? And so I just click pre-roll. Do you see how this popped up right here, this little purple marker? I click post-roll, it pops over here. So this is literally putting something at the very beginning of your show before you start talking or they start hearing music, and this is something at the very end. What's most important, at least for your campaigns and working with advertisers, are what's called mid-roll spots, okay? And that is these little red markers. There's a couple ways to add that. I think the easiest thing to do is once either you have edited your podcast or your editor has edited your podcast, to have someone write down the time codes for when those spots would hit, and then come in here and you can just add the numbers here. When you add the numbers and hit enter, they automatically pop up here, and these little markers pop up here. The other option is you can scrub through this and listen, and then come in here and boom. Like, yeah, that sounds like a good place for an ad. That takes a long time. I don't like to waste time. By the way, did you guys see how I remove something? So sometimes I accidentally click around, or let's say, I add the time code down here. I'll come up here and still listen to make sure I got it right. And if I didn't, first of all, you can move it around a little bit. And then if you're like, wow, that was just, I don't know how that even got there. How do I get rid of that? You just X out that way. Unfortunately, down here, there's no way to just X out of these. Like you type something in wrong and be like, oh, let's remove that. You have to come up here to do it. But that gives you a good idea. You can, minimize this, zoom in, zoom out, all that good stuff. When you're done, just make sure you come up here, click the save button. That's going to pop you out to the episode that you're currently working on. And you can hit save again. All right. And that's going to pop you out here. So one thing, I may have mentioned this earlier, when you schedule an episode to be released later, this is what it's going to look like. If you're wondering why this episode up here looks a little different, it's because when I went through, this is actually already scheduled to release next week. So, having the little box around it, this is how you know that something's been scheduled, right? And I believe, when you do schedule something, it disappears from your drafts and it comes out here. Okay, so these are the ones that have already been released, and this top one has not yet been released. It's scheduled for release later on. You can come over here and just create episodes without going through the draft process, but trust me, once you watch the video that we're doing on inventory, I really want you guys to think about your show in a more holistic way and know what inventory you have and how you can use it just in really smart ways, whether you're dropping promos or whether you are working with advertisers or you're promoting your own stuff. All of this is so important for you guys to really make the most out of your podcast. So it all starts with drafts, and in the inventory video that we're going to do, you're going to see how these two connect a little bit more. Okay, guys, I hope that was helpful. Let us know if you have any questions.